Opening section. People make assumptions every single day. Most of the time, they're small, harmless guesses about the weather or what someone's thinking. But sometimes, those assumptions carry weight, shifting the course of lives in ways no one could predict. What happens when a snap judgment spirals into consequences that leave everyone reeling? This story might make you wonder just how well you truly know the people around you. Have you ever been judged unfairly? Drop your story in the comments. Would love to hear it. You might be surprised at how much power your experience holds. The faint jingle of the glass door at Harper Luxury Autos barely cut through the low buzz of conversation and the sharp click of heels on polished marble. Inside, the showroom sparkled like a museum exhibit, a lineup of gleaming high-end cars basking under carefully angled spotlights. Each vehicle stood like a prize, their curves catching the light just right, exuding wealth and prestige. The air carried the rich scent of leather and the crisp bite of new car polish, a promise of exclusivity reserved for those who belonged. Lila Carter stepped inside, her sneakers whispering against the glossy floor. She paused, taking it all in. The tailored suits, the designer purses dangling from manicured hands, the murmured discussions about horsepower and custom paint jobs. She wasn't here to play the part of the typical customer. Dressed in a simple navy blazer and jeans, her dark hair swept into a messy ponytail, she knew she didn't fit the mold. A young black woman in a space like this? She could already feel the eyes sliding past her, the quick dismissal she'd grown used to. It wasn't just oversight, it was deliberate, a choice to erase her presence. At the sleek front desk, a receptionist, her name tag read, Sophie, barely glanced up from her screen. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat, tinged with boredom. Lila offered a small, polite smile. "I'd like to check out some of your latest models." Sophie's fingers froze over the keyboard for a split second before she gave Lila a quick once-over. The faint lift of her eyebrow, the subtle twist of her mouth, it was a look Lila knew well. A silent question. Is this worth my effort? The answer came fast. "Our sales team's pretty tied up right now," Sophie said, nodding toward the showroom where 3 salespeople lingered, none of them busy. "Feel free to look around, though." Lila bit back a grin. She'd seen this coming, had braced for it. Even. "Thanks," she said lightly, brushing past the desk. As she wove through the showroom, the contrast hit her like a spotlight. A middle-aged man in a crisp gray suit stepped through the doors, his silver hair catching the light, and within seconds, a salesman was at his side, all firm handshakes and warm smiles. "Welcome back, Mr. Grayson," the salesman said, his voice smooth as silk. Lila paused by a midnight blue coupe, her fingers grazing its flawless surface. She knew the car inside out. $195,000 starting price, a twin-turbo V8 that hummed like a predator on the prowl. She wasn't just browsing. She had a purpose, but not one salesperson spared her a glance. Across the room, Ethan Hayes, the top salesman, lounged against a desk, arms crossed, his sharp blue eyes scanning the floor. He had the look of someone who owned the place, not literally, but in the way he carried himself, deciding who got his time and who didn't. Lila caught his gaze for a moment, reading the indifference there. With a slow exhale, he pushed off the desk and ambled toward her, his stride lazy, like he was doing her a favor. "Thinking about a new ride?" he asked, a hint of mockery lacing his tone. Lila turned, meeting his eyes with a calm smile. "Something like that." Ethan gave a slow nod, his gaze flicking to the car, then back to her. "That's our latest. High-performance build, top-of-the-line everything. Not exactly an entry-level pick." There was a subtle dig, the assumption she didn't belong in this league. Lila tilted her head, playing along. "Good to know. Got the keys." Ethan blinked, caught off guard, like she'd spoken in code. "You mean for a test drive?" he asked, eyebrows lifting. "Unless you'd rather I buy it blind," she replied, her tone dry. For a beat, he hesitated, his instincts warring with reason. She didn't fit his mental checklist of a serious buyer, but her confidence threw him. His smile wavered, then snapped back into place. "Let me check on that," he said, turning away. Lila watched as he leaned toward another salesman, whispering something that earned a low chuckle. The second guy shook his head, amused. She let her eyes drift. At the far end of the showroom, a tall man in a tailored coat stepped inside, and instantly, 2 salespeople peeled away to greet him. "Good to see you again, Mr. Langston," one said, all deference and charm. The difference was stark, almost comical. Ethan returned, his grin tight. We're a little short-staffed today, so test drives are appointment only. You can book one if you'd like. Lila raised an eyebrow. Huh, that's funny, a guy who just walked in seems to be getting one right now. Ethan's expression flickered, but he recovered fast. Mr. Langston's a regular, he said smoothly. Oh, Lila cut in, lifting a finger, so that's the trick. He faltered just for a second. Look, he said, sighing, we've got a system here. If you're serious about buying, I'd be happy to. Lila smiled, cutting him off. I'm serious. Ethan's brows shot up. You are. She nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket. Without breaking eye contact, she dialed a number and pressed it to her ear. Ethan shifted, confusion creeping into his stance. Hey, Lila said after a moment, her voice casual. Yeah, I'm at the dealership now. Seems like your crew's pretty busy. Uh-huh. No, not much help so far, but it's cool, I'll figure it out. She paused, glancing at Ethan with a polite smile. Sure, I'll wait. She hung up, tucking the phone away. Ethan crossed his arms, his tone sharp. Who was that? Lila smiled, didn't budge. Just someone who can sort this out. Something in her calm rattled him. At the desk, Sophie suddenly sat up straighter, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Another salesman nearby glanced at Lila, curiosity piqued. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He fished it out, and the second he saw the name, his shoulders stiffened. Lila watched, arms folded, her voice light. Problem? Ethan swallowed hard. The air in the room shifted, and she knew this was just the beginning. His phone screen flashed James Carter, the regional manager. Ethan's grip tightened. He'd only spoken to James a handful of times, and never about anything good. His mouth went dry as he stepped back, turning slightly from Lila. Hello, Mr. Carter, he said, forcing a smile into his voice. The response was clipped, no nonsense. Ethan, what's going on over there? Ethan shot a quick look at Lila, who watched him with a faint smirk. What do you mean, sir? I just got a call from someone important saying they're at your dealership and getting no help, James snapped. Care to explain? Ethan's mind spun. Who had she called? How was James involved? I didn't realize, he stammered. You didn't realize? James's voice dropped, cold and heavy. Are you saying you can't spot a high-value customer when they walk in? Ethan's face burned. Sophie's eyes flicked between him and Lila, her interest growing. I was just about to help her, he tried. No, you weren't, James cut in. You were brushing her off. Ethan's jaw tightened. He scrambled for an excuse, but Lila stood there, waiting, her presence a quiet challenge. Listen, James said, his tone like steel, you're going to assist her personally. Right now. And if I hear one more complaint about that dealership today, we're having a very different talk. The line went dead. Ethan exhaled, his hand clenching the phone. He turned back to Lila, forcing a grin that felt like a grimace. Everything's fine, he said tightly. The tension thickened. Sophie stood abruptly. Would you like some water while you look around? She asked Lila, her voice suddenly eager. Ethan stiffened. Sophie hadn't given Lila the time of day earlier. Lila considered, then nodded. That'd be nice, thanks. Sophie darted to the fridge behind the desk. Ethan swallowed, turning back to Lila. So, where were we? You were about to give me the keys, she said smoothly. His stomach twisted. He glanced at Ryan, a junior salesman watching with a mix of pity and amusement. Ryan shrugged. Better do it, man. Ethan sighed, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out the key fob, hesitating before handing it over. Lila took it without a word, walking to the driver's side of the coupe. She slid in with a grace that said she'd done this before. Ethan's pride took a hit. She pressed the ignition, and the engine growled to life, drawing eyes across the showroom. Even the customers who'd ignored her before looked over. Lila adjusted the seat with practiced ease, gripping the wheel like it was an extension of her. She glanced at Ethan. Well, you coming? He froze. He'd want to dodge this entirely, but James's threat loomed. Jaw clenched, he climbed into the passenger seat. Lila smirked. You look miserable. He kept his face blank. Just doing my job. Funny, she said. Didn't seem like it a minute ago. His grip on the seat tightened. Shall we? He muttered. She didn't reply, just shifted into drive and eased the car onto the dealership's test track. The moment they hit the open stretch, the coupe surged forward, smooth and powerful. Lila drove with confidence, taking curves with precision, pushing the accelerator just enough to feel the engine's pulse. Ethan sat rigid beside her. So, she said, her tone casual, how long have you been here? He stared ahead. 5 years. Long time, she mused. You must be good at what you do. His jaw twitched. He didn't like the direction this was heading.